Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Lapel for New Focus Recordings, and I'm really happy to be here with Tomás Gueglio, celebrating the release of his new record, Duermevela, which came out on September 4th, FCR 252. Hey, Tomás, how's it going?
How are you, Dan?
Good to see you
Great to
from
see
a
you too.
distance. Hope things are
Yeah.
okay in Chicago.
Oh yeah, can't complain.
Yeah. Um, so, sorry, I'm going to put on a little light here.
Sure.
This is a wonderful album of pieces for various different forces. It opens with a solo violin piece, then goes into another sort of version of that same piece for mixed ensemble. It closes with a guitar quartet. Um, and do you want to talk about maybe like the sort of some of the overall aesthetic things going on? I know that
Yeah, sure.
Duermevela has some sort of interesting linguistic background that sort of speaks to some of the things that you're after in some of your music.
Yeah, sure. I mean, all of the pieces were composed during my doctorate or shortly thereafter. So, and at the time, and to some extent now too. I mean, I'm very interested in the idea of dreams and dream states and what happens to the repressive mechanisms when we are sleeping, basically, or in between sleep and awake, right? You have these weird connections, and things happen in your head that are kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I very early in my doctorate, I started pursuing that as an aesthetic principle, and all the pieces in this album, at least, respond to that. I would say, is that true? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So that would
Cool.
be kind of like an umbrella concept for the entire thing, even when it wasn't necessarily by design. It's
Yeah.
not that I said I'm going to compose an album under
Right.
the idea of
Yeah.
X. It
Well,
just
right. I think so
happened
many
to be that
so
way.
many albums come together where there might be a sort of point in the distance that you're moving towards, and then over time you get a clearer picture of how the whole thing holds together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But it's not a conceptual album in the sense that I had something I'm going to a concept that
No,
spins out pieces.
I understand. So the first piece we were gonna take a listen to is actually the second track on the record, Apostillas a Mil Panaderos,
Hmm.
which is it's essentially a retranscription of the opening solo violin piece, right?
That is correct.
For this ensemble Latitude 49. Talk about a little bit about that process of transcribing this music. Is the solo violin piece is pretty sparse
Hmm.
in a way, and it's very sort of considered and deliberate. It's got a lot of
Hmm.
ideas going on, but there's also a lot of pauses, allowing
Yeah.
the listener to digest information. And what was it like to sort of take that material and map it onto an ensemble with larger forces?
Um, that was a long time ago then, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to remember as much as possible. I mean, um, yeah, the violin piece is very sparse, and it's also there's this sort of like virtuoso nature to it. It has fast passages, and for some reason, and this was not so much intentional on my part, but I found myself sort of like building this very existential pointillistic type of landscape out of that violin piece. Um, because the medium was different. The quintet has clarinet and sax, which are great for sustaining pitch, or faking echo, something like that. Also, the percussion can do that too. So um, um, the violin piece is still there and mostly on the strings, I would say, but the points of attack and sustain kind of changed, and
Mhm.
that brought about a lot of a different like character to the piece. Really, the fact that you can be really specific with the attacks and really specific with the sustains, turn it basically into a different piece. So whatever was silence or rest in the violin piece now has this sort of like sustain to it.
Right.
So it's less sparse. I mean, it's still kind of like pretty sparse. It's still
Yeah.
pointillistic. Sounds a bit
Right.
like Webern, but it's still um, But I think it's because of that you don't get a sense that there's a starting and stopping all the time.
Right.
Um,
Or it's almost like the different timbres allowed you to create more layers of foreground and background in a way, right? Like it's
yeah,
sort of
I mean, you have the
three-dimensionality.
layering, you can shape the sustain, basically, you can shape
Yeah.
the attack, you have more possibilities of working
Yeah, of course.
um, on a sort of like continuous type of time.
How did you connect with Latitude 49?
It was in a festival,
Uh-huh.
actually. They were the resident ensemble, or one of the residents ensembles. They were super young at the time. I think they were still like master students.
Hmm.
Um, and I brought them the piece, and they played it on the festival. Then I revised it, and one day they just sent me the recording.
Oh, wow. So
It was amazing.
you didn't know about that session in advance?
They mentioned we're going to record your piece, and
Oh,
then
right.
maybe a year, 2 years passed, and then they sent me the recording, and it was amazing. I mean, they played the
Yeah.
s out of
Yeah,
it. So
it sounds great.
um,
Where are they based?
at the time they were based in Chicago,
Uh-huh.
but now they are all over the place.
Yeah, right. Right.
The percussionist and the pianist live in Waco, Texas, because she has a gig there.
Hmm.
I think the violin player lives in Canada. Sax
Hmm.
player lives in Michigan. Clarinet player lives in Carolina. So
Yeah.
it's a
Right.
very they come together for particular projects, but
Right. Right. Right.
they live all over the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to mention about this before we take a listen?
Um, anything else you want to ask?
No,
I'm fine.
I think I'm cool. We'll listen, and then maybe that will prompt some more conversation.
Great. Awesome.
Okay, so this is track 2 off of Duermevela, Apostillas a Mil Panaderos, Latitude 49. Great. So that was the second track off Tomás Gueglio's new album Duermevela, performed by Latitude 49. Beautiful stuff. The next excerpt that we were going to talk about is your solo harp piece, which you wrote for Ben Melsky, who's executive director,
Yep.
actually, of Del Niente in Chicago,
He's
right?
the boss. Yes.
He's a boss. Cool. But there's a lot of you guys obviously working diligently to keep that ensemble, you know,
Yeah.
going.
It's a small staff, but
Yeah.
we're mighty.
Yeah.
um,
Mighty small staff.
mighty and small. Yeah, like every non-for-profit band, out
Right, of
there.
course. And how long
um,
have you been doing stuff with Ensemble Daniel?
I joined their board 2016,
Mm-hmm.
I think. I think it was 2016. And I was working with Ben. I mean, we were friends from before,
Yeah.
but I was working with Ben, helping him a lot.
Yeah.
And eventually, it made sense for me to become ensemble manager, to be more in the trenches
Yeah.
of the day-to-day of the ensemble. And
Yeah.
that's what I am still. I still am. I'm the manager of the ensemble.
Cool.
Send a lot of emails, arrange a lot of things.
Yeah. Had you done that kind of work previously with different groups?
Not really.
Not
I
too
mean, I
much.
was pretty active in my doctorate with organizing things,
Yeah, of course.
scheduling, blah blah blah, all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I mean, I don't mind it. I like it. So but I think it was more the fact that as a board member, I was already helping Ben a lot with all the stuff. So
Yeah,
uh, it made sense uh, from that
that
point of view.
perspective.
Like,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And actually, this piece was also on Ben's
Mhm.
solo harp record, which is really
Yeah,
amazing. FCR
that album is great.
236.
I mean, that album is like Chicago,
Yeah, yeah.
Chicago
Well,
pride.
right, totally. And it's got
Yeah,
several members of Don Niente on there, and
yeah.
wonderful different combinations with harp. Uh, and that's probably how I discovered your guitar and harp piece, One Baroque.
Through
Uh,
Ben,
I think it was probably through
probably,
Ben, through Ben's record, and then investigating the stuff he'd done with Jesse. And
probably.
then
Yeah,
I think that's when I reached out to you about playing it.
yeah, yeah.
And that's a really wonderful piece with
Oh, thank you.
great microtonal scordatura and just really elegantly written. It was a
Oh,
real
thank you.
pleasure to play that. In fact,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure there's going to be a radio show featuring harp and guitar rep. Do you know about this?
Dave Lake, is it?
Yes, Dave Lake.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he reached out to Ben actually, and
Oh,
he
good.
interviewed him, or he's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
do some kind of like feature on harp and guitar. Like it's a very strange.
I know, I know. It all sprung out of this ice ensemble thing that he attended that was online that had a piece by Michael Keane that he had written for me and Vika
I think I
Watson.
know that. Yeah, I think I know that piece. I think I know
Entanglements,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
he expressed interest in that piece, and then we started talking about more rep, and I said, you should really check out Drew's
Uh-huh.
piece and your piece. Those were the two
Yeah.
that I sort of remembered specifically.
It's a very strange ensemble.
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
awesome. I mean, it's awesome, and I'm a guitar player too, so
Yeah, of course.
strings. Um,
Well, what we were talking about is there's some points of symbiosis between harp and guitar that seem very natural, and there are others that you wouldn't necessarily think of. But like something about the timbre of the attacks is actually really different. So
yeah.
there's this sort of weird quality of like sameness, but then they don't really blend, and the sustain is also
Yeah,
totally
that's the
different.
name.
Like I
That's the
think,
name of my game, actually.
yeah,
I
yeah,
like
yeah.
to do a lot of that kind of like very kind of. It's the same, but not so much,
Yeah,
and
I think
then
you
and
hear
I
that a
really
lot in your
love.
guitar quartet piece in a way too. Even
Yeah,
though
that's
obviously
what.
that's homogeneous instrumentation,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, also like the harp sustains so much longer than the guitar. I think in
Yeah,
most instances, which is really creates like a different dynamic. Anyway,
the piece
that's
in the
all.
album that it's really like exploits that principle, like specifically, is the flute piece, the flute duo,
Oh, right.
where the two flutes kind of like play the same material. It's a heterophony type situation.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
the same melody but slightly off, and so yeah, I like that.
May Musica, right?
Main Música para Flautas is the band. The piece is
Oh,
called
sorry, Un Oiseau 1 and 2.
yeah,
Yeah,
1901.
yeah, right. Quick glance at the album page. Um, all that is to say that harp is an instrument that is clearly near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, I mean, and
And
thanks to Ben. I mean,
thanks to Ben. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's not like
um,
I was writing for harp before I met him, really.
right. And this piece on the record, that's also on his record, After
Mhm.
Ladio, is 2 movements. Uh, and the first has this sort of unconventional technique that has some sort of glissando with the calluses on his fingers, right?
Yeah, it's
And
with this.
it's
This
it's
part of
actually okay. It's like
this
at
part
the
of the hand. Yeah,
interesting.
so it's kind of like a sound.
Yeah.
Actually, if you're interested, maybe later I can send you. The moment we discovered that sound, it's on tape because I
Oh,
was
really?
recording, the session. I was
Yeah,
recording
yeah.
we were, trying things, and I was recording that. And the moment we discovered it, it's like very aha moment, it's like
Yeah.
a eureka moment, really.
I mean, is
Um,
that part of his hands?
mhm.
Is that something that routinely comes into contact with the strings as a harpist? I wouldn't
No,
think so.
never. But I think at the time he was working out. I mean, now he has a kid, so maybe he stopped.
Okay.
but he was, lifting weights and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
So
So
this part of his hand
that makes sense.
had some,
So basically,
was
like, there's a certain amount of like physical weightlifting training that's involved in playing this piece.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a weightlifter, but just
No, I
by
know, but
working out the normal workouts, he
yeah,
has
yeah.
this. And
But if somebody has like a sort of very soft palms of their hands, they might.
I don't think they can do it. I think it's a piece that only Ben can play.
Right.
Because I know other harpists have asked for it, and when I
Yeah.
describe the technique to them, they can't do it. I'm not sure about this really. So don't
Yeah, no,
quote
but
me on this.
that's
But
actually it's pretty interesting. There's
it's
got to be
very specific to.
someone either who has or will write some kind of dissertation on like the phenomenological aspects of writing a piece for somebody's physiological quirks, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked him. I mean, this was everything was there was consensus. I mean, when he was trying all these things, it seemed like his hand would be destroyed by this because the sound it makes is kind of
Yeah.
like this is
Yeah.
probably hurting you, and not at all. I mean,
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So it was an interesting moment.
The harpist of steel. So, and is
Yeah.
this technique featured in the excerpt that you?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we'll be able to hear that.
I think the excerpt starts with the quote of Sharino,
Right.
the sustain, and then it goes into this technique, and then it showcases a little bit of what's going to happen in the second movement. So
And the piece overall is sort of the jumping off point is this other piece by Sharino, right?
Ish. I think I
Ish.
started working the other thing first, and then Ben told me that he was programming the Sharino piece, and it made sense to me to kind of like add this sort of like connection.
Oh, okay.
To that piece. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily that I was inspired by the Sharino,
Got it.
but I was already working on the piece, and then Ben told me that he was programming
Oh, cool.
Adio Trachis, and I incorporated some of that. It made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Should we take a listen to this excerpt from after Ladio, Ben Melsky on harp? And here it goes. Beautiful. So that was an excerpt from a piece for solo harp by Tomás Gueglio from his new release, After Ladio, performed by Ben Melsky. And it's a two-movement piece, right? We were hearing the first of two movements. The second is called Felt, and it actually refers to some literal felt material, right?
Yes.
That gets involved in the playing technique.
So he plays in that second movement. He plays. So he plays with his left hand. He's playing all these harmonics and techniques on the lower strings, and with his right hand, he's playing with a pluck that is covered in felt. So it sounds very, dumped.
Like a plectrum.
Like damp. Yeah, like a plectrum. Yeah, what did I say? Yeah, like a pick. I used the.
Yeah. Sure. Sorry. Yeah.
Plectrum.
Yeah.
I come from rock and roll. That's why.
Yeah.
So it's covered in felt, so it has this very, damp sound.
Right. I've used those picks before too. By the way.
Have you?
Yeah.
I didn't know they were a thing actually. He had one and we tried it, but I never played with one of those.
Yeah, I don't run into them all that often, but every once in a while, I feel like maybe like old jazz 7-string guy.
Yeah, like super smooth.
Yeah, very dolce sort of attack.
It really hides the attack. Yeah.
I feel like we have to say also, just take a second, R.I.P. Eddie Van Halen. I don't know if you heard.
Oh yeah, I,
Yeah.
I, I saw on Facebook.
So
Yeah. How old was he?
65.
That's not old.
Not old. No, he died of cancer.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's a beautiful piece and really a sort of unique sound world for the harp.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the harp. The way I saw the harp is like a huge inside of the piano that you can basically access very easily.
Yeah.
It has that
Right.
quality to it,
Turned
especially
up,
the lower
turned
strings.
vertically.
Yeah, it's like you can like put a piano like this and then
Yeah.
you can access it. Again, especially the lower strings, so you have all this harmonics, multiphonics, all these things that can come out of that are very that especially when with close miking they sound great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Totally.
Mm.
I mean, what's the pedaling situation in that piece?
With the harp?
Yeah.
It's tap dancing.
Yeah. It's yeah.
Especially in some passages. In some passages,
Yeah.
it gets a little bit. One of I think I remember one of the motifs is this descending chromatic scale that gets played in different strings. That's tap dancing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not the worst.
Right.
I don't think. But you should ask Ben about this because I'm probably lying.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that I have so many conversations with composers who are not guitarists, and they usually go in one or two directions. Either they try to write the idiomatic piece for guitar, and then the guitar, in a weird way, writes the piece for them, right? The sort of the shapes of the hands. Or they go in the other direction. They try to just write the music, and then you get stuff where you have like a low F with stuff up in the high, and we end up having a extensive email communication over how to make it work. So
in the most friendly terms.
Yeah, of course, but of course, but I guess I actually always sort of would prefer the composers do the second thing because I think it produces the more interesting result, right? But I wonder if it's a similar thing with writing for harp, because I guess the more you understand the pedaling, you might be tempted to sort of try to do whole phrases or whole sections within a certain pedal, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not speaking about this terminology in the right way, but
no, yeah, but I mean, no, I'm not a harpist, but it seems, I mean, he never really complained about the pedaling, and I do understand how it works.
You do or you don't?
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm actually remembering things.
Yeah.
Because I think the pedaling had like a big part of what ended up happening, especially in the second movement. Like I don't remember this because this is a long time ago, but it's basically the second movement is this phrases, right? And each phrase is basically responding to one set of pedals. So they are quote unquote diatonic as the phrase goes, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then when the pause is happening, there's pedal changes. So that's, I think that factored in the composition of the piece, of the second movement especially.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, it almost it's inevitable that it's going to factor in, right? You can't really avoid it. It's such a key component of how the instrument works. But I suppose the question becomes when you come to a fork in the road and there's something you want to do, and then you recognize, oh, this is going to make the pedaling a lot more complicated. Do you try to mitigate that, or do you just say, okay, well, let's get the ink down and then work with the harpist to figure out how to make it practical,
Yeah, the only moment comes, I think, at the end of the first movement with this kind of like chromatic descending scale I was telling you about.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's happening. And then there's all these harmonics happening too. And that's when it gets a little bit more, there's a little bit of a traffic jam.
Yeah.
But, Ben said, yeah, this is hard, but I'll practice it. And he did.
Yeah.
He figured it out.
Yeah, that's great. That's super interesting.
So, yeah, and I asked him at the beginning of the process do I write the pedals in the score, in the part, or I don't? and he was like, "Don't."
So you leave it up to the harpist to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that changes from harpist to harpist, but I like that.
Right. Like
People
there's
have
different,
idiosyncrasies where they want to see them, how they do this falsetto or
yeah.
this other thing, So
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the mechanism well enough to know if that's the kind of thing that two different harpists can decide, oh, okay, I'm going to finger this differently. Well, it's not really about fingering, but like, could you get the D sharp under one pedaling, but a different harpist will decide to make the pedal change before? I mean, is that, because I imagine there's several pitches that are overlapping.
I'm sure Ben did a lot of that, but
Yeah.
he never told me.
Right. But it has all these implications for overringing harmonies and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if you keep it in one pedaling, then it's still potentially, though they're damping all the time too. It's an insane instrument. It's really cool.
It is.
Well, speaking of insane instruments, possibly slightly less cool, maybe that's a good pivot to the guitar.
I think that's a wonderful segue, actually, because you were just saying how, composers, when they write for guitar, they end up sometimes going too much into the idiomatic nature of the guitar, so they would have one chord and go up and down with that chord, and
yeah, I call it the sort of Villalobos approach to harmony on the guitar, which isn't a dig at him. I mean, because he was so good at what he did, he managed to make it sound like he was doing something that he wasn't doing. I feel like if I play a Villalobos piece for non-guitarists, they're always like, wow. Like that's such an interesting,
because
dramatic harmonic
there's
landscape.
always one or two open strings that he's using too, so that the sound is kind of like insane. It doesn't sound like chromatic scales, like a chromatic chord moving,
Right, but they usually
like,
their response is usually like, oh, what really rich like voicings. And I'm like, actually, this is just like a diminished it's moving down chromatically.
You're just doing that.
But the pedal point makes it, it sort of, as you say, it sort of makes it work, and
it opens it up.
Yeah.
And I had to do the reverse thing because I'm a guitarist and I have all this, this kinetic memory in my fingers. So writing for guitar, it kind of like ran the risk of being a bunch of licks that I know, So I had to basically kind of like turn the guitar into an instrument I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's when the scordatura came to play, the tuning. That I had to tune the guitar in a way that I couldn't kind of like just, play.
Sure. And so is the tuning uniform across all four guitars, or what is the tuning?
So 6 is C, F sharp, C sharp, G and B stay the same, and E flat for the first
C, F sharp, C sharp, G, B, E flat?
Yeah, so it's the C of it. It's this one. Open strings.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's kind of like a bird or something.
You still get the fourth between the fifth and fourth strings, but
between the fifth and the fourth you get a fifth.
Oh, sorry, you said it's C, F sharp, C sharp.
Yeah,
my fault. So actually, you don't really get many fourths in that tuning at all.
You don't get
any fourths. Yeah.
No, but the reason I ended up doing that is because you can play an almost fully chromatic scale with natural harmonics. The only pitch that is left out is the A. I mean, you could potentially play the A as the seventh harmonic of the B, but it's very thin because it's the second string.
Yeah.
And it's the seventh harmonic, so it's very...
Especially on the B string, it's going to be thin.
Yeah. But otherwise, you can do a fully chromatic scale, maybe not contiguous, but kind of
course,
all over the range.
Changing registers,
Changing registers, and that is a big part of the piece, I think, that you can do that.
And that sort of figures into this cantus firmus that's sort of running through the four instruments in a way, right? So
there is a melody.
Yeah. And you create this really great sort of multi-dimensional texture with a series of sounds and extended techniques that this melodic line is sort of snaking through in a way.
That's the structure of the piece, is this melody that is harmonized, each note as basically a chromatic cluster of
Yeah.
3 pitches. It's very, cantus firmus like and reverential in a way. And then
Yeah.
around it, there's all this like kind of like popcorn
Yeah.
with all these techniques and different ways of playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was the quartet, the Nun Tempe ensemble, have they done a lot of music that has a sort of decent amount of extended technique? I mean, they played it
Oh yeah,
beautifully. Yeah. So this is sort
yeah.
of the
They've
wheelhouse.
done much weirder stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
than this.
But
They
then
are
obviously there's a whole range when you're talking about like guitar quartets, of everything from groups that might be most accustomed to playing like Los Angeles guitar quartet type repertoire to a group like that, or there's a few European guitar quartets that have done a lot of experimental music.
There's a couple. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's not the most common formation for contemporary music, but
Yeah.
I really, I mean, to me, it lends itself more to that kind of music than to say Piazzolla,
Oh yeah.
or something like that. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like a toy store for a composer, really. All the things
Yeah.
you can do with a guitar.
Yeah, definitely.
I tried to, one of the things that I ended up using as a principle was like, I wanted everything that happened to happen on the strings. So
Yeah.
there is no kind of like banging or on the
Right.
body of the instrument.
Right.
It just as a productive limitation, so to speak. Everything had to happen on the strings.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I did the Lachenmann duo, the famous
For
subwoofer
Caldwell.
cowbell, yeah, last year, and as it was
Congratulations.
great. What's that?
Congratulations, because
Oh well, I don't, I'm not
really
not saying it to pat myself on the back, but just sort of to. I mean, it was such an interesting process for me. Of course I knew about the piece, but you don't really get inside of it until you're learning it. And to me, it was almost like he wanted to write an anti-guitar polemic. He sort of like everything that you would think to do, I'm going to do everything else, and I'm going to sort of do it in a extremely dogmatic way. And
okay.
the thing about him is that he's so good that he can then create this sort of arc and this rhetorical argument that is basically airtight. Like it's just perfect from beginning to end.
Yeah. I haven't heard that piece in a long time, but I remember it as being pretty playful, actually.
Yeah, yeah. But I would say his set of restrictions are less. It's somehow I hadn't thought about the fact that your piece doesn't have any sort of body percussion or whatever. I mean, there's a sort of built-in empathy to what the guitar does naturally in what your approach to the instrument was, and I think Lachenmann didn't really, he intentionally didn't want to do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had two limitations. One was that everything has to happen on the string, and the other one was no props. So everything is right hand, left hand. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, I generally don't use props because I'm afraid, because it's kind of like you can go, there's so much that I get a panic attack.
Yeah.
So the two things was that everything is on the strings and everything has to be played. It has to sound like, I don't know, a tárrega piece. The same techniques, but they should sound different, But there's nothing like, different from like La Catedral or any rep piece or Recuerdos de la Alhambra or pieces like that.
Yeah. Well, I think the result is that despite the fact that there's plenty of extended technique in your piece, there's also the sense that the box is still ringing. Do you know what I mean? It still invites you into the sound of the resonance of the instrument, And I think that in a way was sort of what Lachenmann was trying to deconstruct. That piece, you do get some resonant qualities of the guitar, but in a way he's trying to point to like the thing that the guitar is that you don't think about when you think about a guitar. It's you get the wood, you have the strings, you have the metal of the frets, It's like this sort of deconstructive.
I mean, it can feel that way from the performer perspective, and that's very interesting, and it's a very deep conversation to be had. I mean, I do like his music, and but I think I like to play in a more not so Nick going against. It's not
Yeah.
going against really, but I like to be in a more in between state where
Yeah.
there's all these things that the guitar does. Let's take that and see what we can do differently.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen your piece live, so it's hard for me to make this comparison. But I
I saw it
imagine.
only one. There's a video online actually.
Oh, okay, I'll check it out. Yeah.
Where you can see the techniques and
Yeah.
everything is on the string. And
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't think of Lachman as someone that really influenced me. It's just
Yeah.
The attitude of so like every time you write a piece, rethinking the instrument in some
Yeah.
capacity, or doing some curation of the instrument for your own purpose. And
Yeah.
I don't think he's the one to start that, but he definitely is the one that mastered it.
Yeah.
And made it into this, as you say, very elegant and very effective rhetorical structures.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this sort of cohesion to the argument in a way.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah. But it's fine. I mean, I actually didn't necessarily. I didn't make that association until I don't remember exactly what triggered it in our conversation.
No, I mean,
but,
and there is a weirdness to the treatment, into the way the guitar is treated, but I think it's different. But what I do think Lachenmann maybe influenced me a little bit, it's in how he works with form, which is this rhetorical, which is kind of traditional, weirdly. The way he works with motifs and materials, it's very German in a way, very organic, very rhetorical, in a context that, in a sound context that is very strange and rare.
Yeah, there's a sort of focused
he
way
he kind of like walks you through things.
Yeah, and there's the exploration of motives. He turns it around. They sort of
His motivic work, if you can get past the oddness of the way he uses instrument, it's pretty traditional.
Yeah. Cool. Well, now we've talked probably longer than the actual piece. Okay. Certainly longer than the excerpts. Let's let everybody take a listen. This is the final movement of a 4-movement piece for guitar quartet, Canción en Duermevela by Tomás Gueglio, and it's performed by the Nuntempe ensemble from Buenos Aires, right?
Correct.
Okay, here we go. Beautiful. So that was an excerpt from the final track on Tomás Gueglio's new record. The piece was Canción en Duermevela. The Nuntempe ensemble from Argentina was playing guitar quartet. And this was fun. Glad we got a chance to talk a bit more about this record. I've really been enjoying listening to this music, and I knew obviously of your stuff, the one Baroque piece that I played, and from Ben's album, but this was a real treat to spend more time.
Thank you for all the work. I mean,
it's really our pleasure. It's a wonderful, wonderful album. Before we forget, wanted to just give a shout out to 2 people who were closely involved in the record: mastering and mixing engineer Peter Leonard and the designer Tato Fernandez.
Yeah, and to my wife Cruz, that she helped so much.
Oh yeah,
distribution, the social media presence.
Yes, I noticed she the enthusiasm on social media was really great.
Yeah, she helped a lot with that.
Yeah. So cool. Well, congrats again, and to everybody out there who's still listening. This album, of course, is available through our site, through Bandcamp, all the other places you would buy or not buy music, and take a listen. It's really wonderful stuff. So thanks again, Tomas, and we'll see
Thank
everybody
you, Dan.
next time. See ya. Bye.